So next up on our pre-conference specials for Regen Ag Chat is Ian Robertson. So my name is Genever.
I'm Nic Renison.
So we had a chat with Ian, and Ian and his colleague Jade are coming to talk at the Carbon Calling conference on the Thursday, which is going to be at Nic and Reno's farm. And he's going to be really talking about the chemical and the physical structure of soil. And Nic, you've done some tests, and he, within this chat, helped you sort of interpret them, and further that will be done. There'll be more information on that, won't there, at the conference?
So basically, I've sent a load of soil in to Ian. He's looked at it in great detail, huge detail, and is going to help us sort out our little problems, because there are little problems within the soil test, which are obvious when you're actually in the fields. So it's going to be a really good opportunity to, because I think you mentioned in the pod, Liz, that you get a soil test done and you put it in the drawer and you don't really look at it. So this was a slightly more expensive soil test, but I think Ian will be really good at explaining the ins and outs of it and how we can do better.
So no, it'll be good. Well, he provides some really useful information in this, but again, there'll be more detail on the Thursday. So over to Ian.
Welcome, Ian Robertson, to this podcast. First of all, can we start at the beginning of you and how come you become so obsessed with soil? Have you always been a soil man?
Thanks for bringing that. Yes, yes, I've always been involved with soil, obsessed, involved with soils. It started, I'd blame my father. We grew up on an organic farm. We were the third registered organic farm in Scotland. And I was right from the get-go, everything we did had to be based in the soil. Dad was probably more of an obsessive than I am. We were digging holes, looking at it. And if there was anything going wrong in the fields, it was about, well, why is it? Let's find the cause rather than the symptom. Really, from an early age, it was all about that, which was brilliant. However, then going off to university and then doing what my father joked was normal farming, that everyone thought I was a little bit odd because I would quite like talking about soils and worms, and it wasn't really catered for overly. So through the years, I've just kind of kept looking at it, scratch away at it, and that's why we started Sustainable Soil Management in 2008, I think it was, to look at the soil in more detail and try and join the sort of physics, chemistry, and biology together rather than just being stuck in one area. And from there, it's got even more interesting and more interesting. The world is moving on. Everyone is now talking about sort of holistic soil management, which really excites me because there's so much that we don't know, but there's so much we do know that we can make changes already. So it's blame my father. Keep it simple.
So what made him soily?
What made him? Very good question. He was involved in shipbroking and then managed to get hold of an 80-acre rundown farm and just thought that actually there was a lot more to farming than just opening cans or buying fertilizer, etc. And he just started looking at things differently. And it was really as simple as that. He had the farm, didn't want to do it conventionally, started growing organically, met a few people in Scotland, and that kind of developed from there, really.
Oh, so on a day-to-day basis, you are looking at analysis, giving farmers advice over the phone, I guess, or in the field?
Yeah, you spend most of your day, there isn't an average week anymore for anyone anyway, but we spend a lot of time, or I spend a lot of time on farm, whether that's digging holes or looking at just walking farm, looking at nutrition, crops, etc. And then we do a lot of knowledge transfer. So we do run a lot of training courses for grower groups, water companies, etc. And then spend a lot of time, as you say, on teams going through whether it's tissue tests, sap tests, soil tests, and trying to join the connection between a actively functioning soil to how that's reporting then through into the crop, so we can then make differences into the crop. Quite often we end up looking at plant analysis, which is wonderful, but that's a bit like treating the symptom again. That's a result of what is happening underground. So a lot of our study, we're looking at those, we'll end up saying, well, we need to go back a wee while and actually look at soils and whether that's a physical looking at soils, going out in the field and digging it, or doing very detailed chemical testing. Like the gold, we developed the gold soil test, which is now the Sustainable Soil Management Gold Soil Test. It's probably one of the most thorough tests in Europe. And we take soils all around, or in from all around Europe. We analyze them. We use NRM as our lab. And then we then sit down, as you say, go on teams, report back on all that information to whatever the grower, whether it's dairy farming, orchards, high value cropping, etc. So it's a brilliantly varied life, but it always comes back to soil.
So we've had, you're coming here for the third day of Carbon Calling to do a workshop, and we've done 3 fields with the gold test. So we'll be able to share the results of those fields and walk the fields and look at how the results came back. And it's a huge A4 sheet full of lots of data, which Liz will have the brains to decipher far more than me. But it's going to be really interesting to go through those kind of in situ with you.
The goal, I make no apologies, the bit of paper that you're looking at is mighty complex, and there's lots of numbers on it. There's one saving grace to the gold soil test, is that all the numbers are on one page. So we can look at it rather than turning a page over page over page. You look at it, and I kind of joke that I always try and print 2 copies off when you go on farm. One that we keep, the other one is you get a pencil, you kind of draw from one number that affects the next number that affects the next number. You end up with this amazing kind of spider's web of connectivity, if you like, with the numbers, because there isn't one number that we're looking at. There's lots of different things that will allow us to understand maybe why something isn't working, and it's related to that. And then there are also contradictions on it, because soil, I'm afraid, isn't black and white. It's not just this or that. It could be that there's a lot of, there could be, because we're looking at a very detailed chemical soil test on a bit of paper. And unless we then go out in the field and physically check what we're seeing chemically and biologically check what we're seeing chemically, you're doing everything a disservice, because we can't. I might be right. I don't think there's a soil test that covers all those things that you can look at on a bit of paper and go, right, I'm going to farm from my desk. We need to still go out in the field, dig some holes. And that's what's quite exciting when it comes to Carbon Calling, is we've got this brilliant chemical soil test. We're going to go in the field. We'll then look at the actual physical structure of the field. We'll look at aggregate stability. We'll look at the riser sheets hopefully on the plant roots. And at that point, you can then say, right, well, here's what the chemical says. Here's how it affects the physics, and here's how it's affecting the biology. Which one do we need to change to enhance the productivity of the farm? Until we've done all 3, we don't know. It's not simply one or t'other.
And interestingly, we've had your goal tests done, but for SFI and stuff, we've had some basic tests done in the same fields. So we'll be able to look at the differences between those 2 test results and the kind of maybe the lack of information we get from the more basic one.
Yeah, the basic one, again, is a really good place to start as a basic soil test. The difficulty I have slightly is that that's kind of based on a sufficiency model. That you get an indices back and it says it's good, therefore you don't apply any, or you get low indices and you apply some. And at that point, I'm going, brilliant. But if you've been farming this for a number of years, why have we got a low indices? Is it because it's just not reacting with the reagent that we use for the test? And you could have an awful lot more there. We kind of talk about the fridge and the freezer kind of analogy, that if you're measuring your food in your kitchen, you've got food on your kitchen table and food in the fridge. That's kind of what the indices method is measuring. You'll also have a great big deep freeze in the house somewhere. And that deep freeze has got loads of food in it. But it's complex. It's complex, but it's frozen, sorry. And what we need to do then is figure out, we need to measure the freezer. And then we need to figure out, how do we get stuff out of the freezer, defrost it, cook it, etc., to give it as food. And by measuring those different pools, that allows us to understand how we can then, what I would do, much more sufficient in our farming, because you've already bought that food that's in your deep freeze, or it's the natural parent material of your soil. And we need to then figure out in management practices, whether it's cultivation, physical, biological, mycorrhizal fungi, herbs, etc., or chemical, it could be gypsum, liming, etc. All those elements will drive a more functional soil, pulling from those deep freeze, fridge, and kitchen table pools. So the standard test isn't bad. It's just if we want to delve more into a more cycling functional soil, we need to do a bit more testing.
It's a great analogy. Liz's freezer's currently full of chickens.
I'm coming around.
They've all sold out. They're already allocated. Sorry, next batch.
Next batch. Right.
And I think it's, I suppose, why we're interested for the Thursday is this. I've been to a few places where they've spent lots and lots of money on soil tests and they sit in a folder somewhere and it's not being used. So the hope of the session is that at the end of it, we have like 3 action points for Nic and Reno to do in the next 3 months or whatever it happens to be. That's my goal. How likely do you think that is?
Very, very, very likely. I've always prided myself on the fact that there's no point doing a soil test unless we're going to take some action. And your point, brilliant, Liz, in that so many soil tests sit in files or never get used. So I'd rather you do a little bit of testing, but we then spend time interpreting the numbers, hopefully enabling you to read the numbers to then take actions and look at the bits that really matter. So I'm going to start ahead of ourselves, but if you take some of the results that you've got back, yes, you've got trace element deficiencies. So we could spend loads of money applying trace elements, but actually there's bigger issues going on in the soil, Nic, that we need to address before we do the trace elements. And there could be, again, don't have any spoiler alerts, but we'll wait till everyone gets it on the Thursday. There's things that we can do that will allow the soil to function, that will allow potentially some of those trace element issues to disappear because you've now got a functioning soil rather than a dysfunctional soil. So to answer the question is, yeah, 100%. We will always go away with a minimum of 1 or 2 action points, maybe 3, 4, 5, and it will be over a time scale as well. So there'll be some stuff to do now, and then over the next 2 or 3 years, here's what we could then weave into it.
And Nic, what are the fields currently not doing? What are you not happy with at the minute?
Well, we really don't cope with a drought. That's one. I mean, not that anyone copes with a drought, but Reno says we're always only 3 weeks away from a drought. We've got quite a lot of compaction, I think, at the minute. We have a really bad iodine deficiency. So we have in the past lost some calves and or had that kind of early kind of weak things being born. So we have to supplement for that. Selenium and cobalt are an ongoing issue, but I think that's kind of all around here. It's always a problem around here. And we don't use fertilizer. And I'm just conscious that we put Limex and lime on when we first got here, but we probably haven't put anything on for probably 7 years. So and every year we're selling a load of stock. It's going off, and we buy in some straw, but we're not really. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing kind of filling up what we're taking off, possibly. Does that make sense?
You're in an extractive model. I've been reading a book. But also the whole, I suppose so Stuart Johnson would say, isn't it? It's that idea of free stuff, is that the idea of regenerative type systems is that we are making most use of what's in the soil and capturing sunlight.
I mean, we're growing plenty of grass, but I guess it's the thing of, is there some compaction and can we do better?
Yeah, if I look at the soil tests, there's a sort of red line, as you'll see, there's a really high iron on your soil that's quite sandy. That shouldn't be there. So that's an indicator of slow water movement. Okay, it could be compaction, or it could be high iron in your parent material, I don't know. But that's where that's a red flag to me. All right, we must go and dig a hole. And we go out there and we see that we've got consolidation, compaction. So whatever I then say is, well, the first thing we need to do is allow that soil to be restructured. And that could be aeration of it, any number of things that we need to do to allow the plant roots to do what they want to do. And the other thing you just mentioned was a sort of drought intolerant. I mean, I know everyone's had problems with drought, but some of your water dynamics are driven by your cations, so magnesium, calcium, potassium. You've got quite a big imbalance between magnesium, that I suspect your soils are wetter in winter and drier than you'd like them to be in summer. And that's an immediate red flag again, that's one of our biggest drivers that we need to address before we start doing anything else. That they would be the things again we'll talk about on Thursday, and then go out and look in the field. That we will probably see compaction. We do some very simple tests when we're out there. We'll probably dig, so if it's very dry still, we'll dig some of your soil up and put it in a bucket of water, because quite often people will dig in a field in August and the field's hard and dry, and it's not compacted, it's hard and dry. It's like a breeze block. So what we're desperately trying to do and get our aggregate stability is to have a soil that's like a lovely chocolate sponge cake, and not like a brownie. We go in there and dig your field up, and it's a brownie. You dig it up and you put it in a bucket of water. It doesn't really bubble. And at that point, I know we've got problems that we then need to potentially to take mechanical action to, so aeration, subsoil, or whatever. If we dig it up and put it in a bucket of water and it bubbles, it's just like a stale sponge cake or a breeze block. You do not need to do anything. It's just hard and dry. Walk away. And we've used that very simple test on farm to massively reduce recreational cultivation, because it's just enabling us to look and see what we're doing. I would, however, suspect that we may have a bit of brownie going on in your farm, which again,
a bit of what?
Chocolate brownie.
Okay.
Is that just dense, one better, lack of air. And at that point, there may be a requirement for some physical intervention with a bit of steel cultivate, or what, who knows. But until one knows, till one digs it and has a look, it's very difficult to have a blueprint to say what to do.
And the other thing that I am always wanting to find, and we are starting to get some of the, what's it called, Liz? The dreadlocks? No?
Rhizosheaths.
Rastafarian thing.
We have to be quite careful about using phrases, but carry on.
Sorry.
I'm just too woke. This is the problem.
But
yeah, I want more dreadlocks.
Yeah, well, your soil's got reasonably good sand content, so of all soils, should be quite easy to dig out to see dreadlocks. If we're not seeing lots of dreadlocks, rhizosheaths, on the plant's roots, it can be species related, so you don't often see them on brassicas, for argument's sake. You're seeing them much more on grasses and some of the herbs. But if we're not seeing it, it goes back down to that we may have poor aggregate stability, and that aggregate stability is all happening at like 0.003 mil. It's tiny, right down to your sand silt clay layer. And that sand silt clay layer, I suspect, again, looking at your calcium, potassium, and magnesium in the soil, is being squeezed. It's not allowing for that kind of gaseous exchange stability, because there's an awful lot of magnesium there. And you could spend quite a lot of time and effort going, right, I'm going to try and get my rhizosheath and not get it, because that's a biological thing, but the chemistry isn't allowing the biology to thrive. And people will level at me, that's fine, Ian, we'll do it with biology, we'll do different, we'll put herbs, deeper rooting materials in, etc. But I'm impatient. Ultimately, I want you to have rhizosheath in the next year, so therefore it may be that we do some physics with some machinery, do some chemistry, could be gypsum, for argument's sake, and then allow the biology to work. So we kind of fast track things, because I want you to make sure you can produce as much high quality forage as possible to turn into chickens, livestock, or whatever we're going to do with it.
I feel like I'm getting a urine sample analysed and I'm sharing the results.
That's later on the Thursday. We haven't broached that one yet. But I think it is also acknowledging, this is all my horse talking, but there is an element of vulnerability, isn't there? So you are willing to put your soil test out. And what's interesting is that 7 years into your like mob grazing, do you mean intense adaptive multi-paddock grazing, however you want to define it, and it hasn't necessarily solved everything yet. And so I think that's also quite interesting, that some of it is about tweaks. Some of it could be patience, couldn't it? But you've changed the grazing system, and still these soils are not necessarily repairing as quick as you would like.
Yeah. And interestingly, one of the fields that we've tested, it's called the Triangle Field, but that is now full of cocksfoot, and it's doing quite well compared to how it was. But yeah, we're going for long rest periods now, so we're aiming for over 80 days rest. So the fields are getting kind of rougher, I'd say, rather than supersonic high powered, like how you'd imagine them to be.
Yeah, because you're doing some really good things, and it just that goes back to is there something we're just missing in the physics, chemistry, and biological pools? And the one thing the soil test has shown up, yes, there is something missing in the chemistry that might enable us. It's take the handbrake off. We're driving with the handbrake on, or one tire that's running low. You put the air back in the tire, and off we go again. And that's the joy of kind of looking at a quite complex soil test that allows us to help. Because you guys are no slouches. You're well down on the journey, and it's like, well, actually, we just missed one little bit.
And it's quite exciting opening up that possibility, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you're excited, Nic? You're going to get a list of jobs.
No, I'm excited. I just hope it's a nice day that we can all kind of wander around. But yeah.
And I think, we've also done that chat with Daniel. So that's the next. He'll also do some more focusing on the soil biology side as well. So, but I remember, Ian, your point before, which is build the house and they will come, isn't it? So it's also making sure that the soils are in the correct functional state for the biology to do its job. Well,
that's where we're all a team. And, I think it's really important for us as advisors out there to remember we are all a team, that physics, chemistry and biology, no one works in isolation. So we've got really clever physical people working with machinery. Don't ignore the chemists or the biologists. We have to get this together, and that's why it's quite exciting. Again, Dan and I was talking. We'll talk about physics and chemistry, and Dan will talk about biology and how we all weave it together, rather than over focusing on one area, because that's where we will then sort of end up getting stuck and not enhancing the soil as fast as we can.
And a farmer's thinking, are you busier than ever, or is it just a continual kind of slow increase, or how's business, Ian?
Well, that's how long did it take us to get this meeting organised?
You're busy.
But yeah, busy. Yeah. Don't look like that, Liz. Busy. Yeah, took us a long time. Yeah, we are. I
enjoyed the emails going backwards and forwards. It was good fun.
It was good fun, wasn't it? Yeah. No, we're super busy, and again, probably the last 5 years, it's gone really, really ratcheted up, and even before COVID, it was getting very busy. Post COVID, I think that there's a head change in where thought process about soils were. So yeah, they're hugely busy. We're actively recruiting now for more people to help us within the team. But it's also managing it, because there's a lot of information we have that, working with people like yourselves, etc., we can help fast track. It's what I have learned in my years is there's no point keeping all the answers here. It's really, and I love the kind of the regenerative world, is because we're all really keen to share. I'd love to be on a farm for 2 years and they say, right, Ian, really cool, I know what I'm doing now. You don't need to come back, or come back once a year for a quick cup of tea and look how we're getting on. We don't need to be hooked in to continue going on farm for the rest of our lives. It's share the information and share the knowledge. There's so many exciting things happening on farm, with the experimenting, etc., that is giving the results, and that's where we're all coming together, whether it's carbon calling, groundswell, etc. The sharing that knowledge is fantastic fun. So yes, rather busy.
Well, thank you for your time today, and thank you very much. And we're really looking forward to seeing you on Thursday, the 26th of June.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
I think they're burnt into her memory, but apparently not. Thanks, Ian.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Regen Ag podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tim Nicholson from Cactus Tree Guards, Reno for the music, and Pete Ord, the podcast wizard from the studio at Sunbeams, part of the Annie Mawson Sunbeams Music Trust. See you next time.